This week in Destiny, I'm going to be focusing less on what actually happened during the week, and instead using this video as a chance to talk a bit about the Crucible. This is the PvP game mode of the game, and it's essentially one of the halves that makes Destiny whole. If you're not spending your time fighting aliens in something like raids or dungeons, you're almost definitely playing the Crucible, where you're fighting other players instead. This is probably my favorite part of the game, purely because of its competitiveness. You're given a rank to work towards improving, and even though there's levels to the different PvE factions as well, the Crucible gives an additional hidden rank, which I believe is called Elo in this game, but it's entirely hidden from the player in the base game and impacts the players you play against. If you're deemed to be in a specific skill group / rank, you're almost definitely going to be playing against players that are similar. And while in the PvE you can repeatedly play against the same AI that has no way of improving and therefore no way of challenging you when you surpass them, you're almost guaranteed to eventually beat them. In the Crucible, this isn't really the case. You could go on a 5-game win streak just to get beat out by a team who plays better, and the only way to improve is to keep playing, lose some more, and keep playing after that. Your opponent being the other player means that there's always a potential challenge ahead of you because they can get better at the game the same way that you can. And skill, of course, is a big factor, but game knowledge and playtime are big elements too. There's tons of customizability in Destiny, and that's part of what makes the game exciting when it comes to PvP. Each class has multiple subclasses, each with its own abilities and attributes, and the gun archive is massive, meaning that you have a great chance of finding a playstyle that you like. And if you couldn't tell by now from the footage, I love running the shotgun melee on my Titan. It's not the meta as much anymore, but it's still super fun and a totally viable playstyle most of the time. Speaking of which, the shotgun I used comes from the activity Dares of Eternity, which I talked about a few weeks ago. It's called the Wastelander. It's awesome. However, because all the perks you get on a gun are random, you could get this exact same gun that I have, but maybe it sucks, or it's bad in the Crucible but good in PvE. And this is why playtime is such a big part of improvement in Crucible. You can totally just get lucky and get a god roll Wastelander first try, but most of the time you have to play different activities week after week to try and get a good one so that you can even compete with the other players. This is how the grinding aspect that Destiny's known for makes its way into the Crucible as well. And on top of this, there's also the thing I mentioned earlier, the meta. It essentially means the different weapons that are better to use based on what's strong during the season. Right now, weapons like sidearms, SMGs, and linear fusion rifles are the best, so farming activities that drop good ones would be a player's best option. And now that we've talked a bit about what the Crucible is, let's look more at the players on this side of the game. Like any competitive player versus player experience, Crucible can be toxic and much easier to get mad at while playing. I'm not sure if this is the reason for there being no all chat in the game, but it would make sense. I will say Destiny is good at uniting players using different platforms, such as with text or voice chat that anyone can use, but being able to only type to your team and them only being allowed to see it if they join the text chat is really annoying. Especially when tons of modern competitive games have all chat, and it makes for a much more interactive experience between players. Whether that interaction is for better or for worse though is kind of up to you to decide. I'm also not a super big fan of the way that you add friends in this game. For example, if I liked playing with someone on my team and sent them a friend request, if they don't see the message that pops up once at the bottom of their screen, chances are they're never going to see that request again since it's hidden behind a bunch of menus. In a more recent week, for example, I wanted to talk to some players about the game, so I tried adding them or even whispering to them if possible, but most of the time I would get no response. And of course, it's not fair of me to blame the game for having the handful of players that I've seen be less interactive, and in fact, between me writing this week's video and actually recording this voiceover, I've talked to some players just through using the in-game features that I'm complaining about right now. But this is still a small group compared to the amount of people I've tried to interact with, and I think it would be a major benefit if the game tailored itself to allow for more player interaction. Anyways, in a few weeks I ended up getting to play with some people through LFG, so soon enough you'll see how that week, and I'll talk about my experience with that. But for now, that's everything, and I will see you next week.